If you want to make a mark, then you've got to make sure you open with a bang. Why do you think the movie industry determines box office success via opening week figures? The TV region knows this better than most, which is why I've decided to give you my top 25 best superhero opening scenes in the movies. Hugh Jackman has shown us so many versions of the beloved Logan that it becomes harder and harder to top his appearances with each passing film. Take the opening to 2013's The Wolverine, for example. That film literally opened with a bang, and I'm not exaggerating by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, I'm actually playing it down because we're talking about the atomic bombing of Japan. Yeah, this sequence gave us a taste of Oppenheimer way before Christopher Nolan. Of course, the main selling point of this opening is the fact that Logan gives us a true glimpse of his healing powers. I mean, sure, we've seen him pop a bullet out of his freaking skull, but this is a goddamn nuclear bomb. How on earth can any living being survive something so intense? On top of that, bro casually shakes it off and looks even better than I would on my best day. Man, I don't know how else to put this scene forward because it's an S-tier power flex by the most powerful character of the X-Men franchise. Hey, come to think of it, Deadpool 3 is going to have two characters with super healing abilities. I'm sure they're going to make use of that in some way or the other. Contrary to what most people would say, being a college kid is not an easy life. Just take Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man as an example. Yeah, I know he's considered to be the least preferred out of the coveted trio, but come on, he's amazing, and you should say it as much as you can. This version of Peter Parker was really sincere, especially when it came to his girlfriend Gwen Stacy. The opening to The Amazing Spider-Man 2 pretty much summed it up in the best possible way. Bro was fighting gangsters, keeping innocent civilians safe, befriending a prepubescent Electro, and pissing off a Russian rhino all at the same time. And he still managed to make it in time for his graduation ceremony where he had his romantic moment with Gwen. Yeah, that's boyfriend of the year material right there. Just ignore the passion he has for cracking bags though, yeah? On an honest note, the action choreography here was top class, even though it was a lot of CGI. We got to see a refreshing take on what an opening sequence can establish, and I'll repeat myself once again, this movie really didn't deserve the hate it got during its release run.
So don't waste it living someone else's life.
Change our fate.
I've always maintained that Days of Future Past is the most grim and bleak depiction of the X-Men universe, and the opening scene is more than enough to prove my point. It's actually split into two halves that showcase contrasting emotions. With the initial showcasing of a bleak future with no remnants of Professor X and his team, I almost felt as if I was being transported into a dystopian cyberpunk future. The colour scheme also reminded me of John Wick, so yeah, death was definitely the dominant theme here. On the other hand, we're then taken to a sequence where there's chaos but still hope as the mutants do their best to fight the Sentinels for as long as they can to buy enough time. Yeah, it's a whirlwind of emotions all fit into one complex introduction, and it really helps us understand what's at stake, especially later on in the movie. I love the flow of the film because it clearly established the end goal right from the start. Man, if only they could have built on from this moment and rebuild the timeline in a way that wouldn't be so confusing. Okay, before I go ahead, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Keeps. Whilst guys like Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham are certified badasses, I'm sure most men would prefer not to end up with their hairline, or rather lack of one. Enter Keeps, an online subscription service that offers FDA-approved treatments to treat male pattern baldness. Having already helped over 1 million men worldwide, Keeps delivers customized and curated solutions discreetly to your home at regular intervals suited to your needs and convenience. You can also contact the Keeps care team via their secure messaging portal if you've got any questions related to your orders. All their treatments are recommended by licensed medical providers, and clinical studies have shown that they're 90% effective in treating hair loss issues. Personally, I was lucky enough to nip my receding hairline in the bud by starting my Keeps package just at the right time. They also offer hair thickening shampoos, conditioners, and styling pomades for healthy hair growth. Start seeking out results within 6 months of starting regular treatment. Check out keeps.com/thetv-region or visit the link in the description for exciting offers that only cost half of what traditional pharmacies would charge. So, what are you waiting for? Start your hair loss treatment today with Keeps. If you consider the way the first Doctor Strange movie was made, I'm sure you would have thought he was going to become an S-tier MCU name moving forward. Now, that most definitely was the plan, especially with the way he was presented in Infinity War and Endgame, but after what we saw in Multiverse of Madness, it's hard to say how much of an icon he's going to be when compared to the OG Avengers. I mean, bro was treated as a side character in his own sequel. I don't think that's fair. See, I'm even using the line spoken by Wanda for my references. Alright, I'm getting a bit carried away now, so let's focus on the opening of 2016's Doctor Strange, where, once again, the titular character isn't even present. Sorry, Benedict, I don't mean to shade you like this, but it is what it is. Now, if you look at the Ancient One, she is a grade A badass, as can be seen when she deals with Caecilius and his disciples right from the start. Of course, we get to see some neat fight sequences, but it's the trippy nature of how the Sorcerer Supreme moves the architecture around that wins us over. It was such a different visual strategy when compared to the other MCU flicks, and it just goes to show how diverse CGI can really be if you put in the right amount of effort. You know what's funny about this scene? The Suicide Squad actually does what they're supposed to do, die during their missions. I'm not kidding, just read the comics and you'll know I'm telling the truth. Of course, Team 1 was never going to be the main squad because, if you're being serious here, Pete Davidson isn't the type to last more than a day. It was actually satisfying to see him go right after his betrayal because I was kind of getting annoyed of hearing him hanging out with the prettiest woman on the planet. Anyway, the opening battle was such a different take on how films usually open. I mean, if you compare it to the typical superhero trope, it's the complete opposite of what the studios want us to see. The so-called primary team gets wrecked in the most brutal ways possible, so even I was wondering why the heck we're being shown something so out of pocket. Obviously, it was freaking hilarious because James Gunn has got a twisted sense of humour, so I'd call it a solid effort overall. Oh yeah, this one was definitely around the corner. The OG Iron Man was the opener for the MCU to the general audience, so it only makes sense for it to open with such a grand vibe. Technically speaking, the Incredible Hulk had also released in 2008, but Iron Man comes first as per the timeline, and nobody really considers Edward Norton's version of Bruce Banner to be canon. Anyway, the focus here is on Tony Stark, who gives us an amazing summary of his character. On the one hand, we get to see the sassy billionaire who likes to take selfies with soldiers and pose like a badass in the face of an explosion. And on the other hand, we also see a panicked human being fearing for his life, just like any other regular person out there. Plus, the moment where Tony sees his own missile attacking him is probably as literal as karma can get in the film world. Those Jericho missiles caused a lot of damage, and it helps to see the impact coming right after we see them being celebrated by those who would go on to become their victims. It's almost like we saw a mini movie within the first 5 minutes of the actual film. James Gunn makes yet another appearance on my list, and this time he's taken the credit for his most recognised franchise of all time. We all love the Guardians of the Galaxy, so he knew he had to make a sequel even more interesting. Want to know what he did to stand out? He turned the opening credits of the movie into a whole battle sequence. This is probably one of the most innovative and creative ways to begin a film, and the visual effects here were peak MCU standards. I felt like I was in the middle of a freaking festival. It's basically Baby Groot just dancing around while the rest of the Guardians try their best to keep him safe from a giant octopus monster. It's even funnier when you realise that this is just Vin Diesel having fun like an overgrown baby. Man, I still wonder if I can ever be so famous that I can make millions of dollars just for saying 3 words over and over again. I'm Groot. Jokes aside, this was a spectacular sequence from every angle, especially from a technical standpoint, so it deserves all the praise in the world. It's been 20 years since this masterpiece graced cinema screens all over the world, and guess what? It still slaps. For my coveted TV region regulars, you'll be aware of how much I love to talk about the Nightcrawler scene from X-Men United. It's not heroic or anything like that. Rather, we have to see an otherwise sweet mutant taking on the whole White House and almost sending the president to meet his maker. I wonder how Donald Trump would have reacted to a German dude trying to take the throne. Anyway, the praises that I've sung for this scene are plentiful and should be enough to fill up an entire book. The action choreography is understandably top class, but what really sets it apart is how the visual effects team and the practical effects team came together to utilize Nightcrawler's teleportation skills. Like, even I'd want to teleport and kick muscle boys in the face. There's something about the films of the 2000s era that hits me hard with a strong dose of belonging, and I'm not just talking about the effects of nostalgia. But yeah, this was such a strong start to the movie, and the fact that it could maintain the momentum throughout kind of proves why most people prefer the sequel to the original. Normally it would be an easy choice to have a Superman entry in my list, but what's shocking about this scene is that Kal-El doesn't do anything in it at all. As a matter of fact, Bro's just a little baby fresh out of his mother's womb, so it's all up to his dad Jor-El to do the fighting for him. Honestly, I would have loved to have seen more of Russell Crowe and his magnificent beard in this film, because let's face it, he did a much better job as Superman's dad than as Zeus in Thor: Love and Thunder. It's an eventful sequence that has all kinds of visually appealing moments, and I have to give it to the actors for making it so captivating and thrilling, even though we didn't even see Henry Cavill as Superman. Sure, General Zod puts in a solid show, but it's Jor-El who steals the limelight with his pure grit and determination. There's also the whole emotional angle of our hero having to bid farewell to his parents before even realising who they are. Sometimes I wonder why the DC Universe didn't stick with this kind of vision, especially with the CGI. It's way better than a fake moustache, that's for sure. Imagine opening a film with a typical night in Gotham. Pretty standard stuff, you'd say, wouldn't you? However, some goons show up and all of a sudden act like the menace to society that they are. But now you must be thinking that there's some kind of huge payoff, and guess what? You're right. Batman shows up and gives us all the iconic scene that holds up just as well in 2023 as it did back then in 1989. It's so iconic and legendary that it's often used as a blueprint in modern superhero films. What most people don't understand is that this movie and this scene in particular changed superhero films forever. Back in 1989, the only superhero films people had to base their expectations on were the campy 1960s Batman and Christopher Reeve's Superman. When Bruce Wayne held that guy over the edge, everyone had their jaws hanging as they were watching a legitimately scary scene, but you weren't even sure what was going to happen next. Tim Burton's Batman needs way more recognition than it gets because everybody thinks of the modern MCU films nowadays. Of course, they're pretty amazing in their own right, but we wouldn't have them today without Michael Keaton's OG Dark Knight.
I'm Batman.
Karl Urban is a household name nowadays because of his role as Billy Butcher in The Boys. However, he's a pretty good actor who deserves more praise for his performances like the one he gave in 2012's Dredd. Sure, we don't even get to see his face once in the entire film, but that's what the whole point was in the first place. If we're talking about the source material, then Dredd never took the helmet off the whole time, and that's the one thing I appreciate immensely in this movie. And anytime an actor has to wear a mask for their role, they always take it off about half the damn time. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Mr. Stallone. Anyway, props to Karl Urban for keeping his ego in check because the net results sure paid off. As far as the opening scene goes here, it's a pretty straightforward sequence in terms of the writing, but it's the visual design that enhances its impact. I love seeing those mega towers mixed in with regular looking buildings to provide a genuine contrast. It was such a good decision not to go super futuristic like the 1995 Dredd did, which is why I hail this as the superior version. And of course, seeing the titular superhero put on his helmet and get ready for duty is on point with his loyalty to the character.
Judges.
The God of Thunder was always presented as a pretty serious character who never wanted to take a joke, so when we got to see Thor behave the way he did in the opening sequence of Ragnarok, it sure came as a pleasant surprise. I mean, he's messing around with freaking Surtur as if they're banter lads from the UK. I know I've had my issues with excessive humour in the MCU, but this scene in particular did keep me thoroughly entertained. The fact that Thor ends up humiliating Surtur right after is a whole other flex, but I really want to give props to the way his humour holds up here. It truly was a breath of fresh air for the character, and it led to a successful run at the box office as well. You know what I really liked about this whole sequence? The fact that Surtur was voiced by Clancy Brown. The role suits him perfectly well, and Bro even went on to voice Damien Darkblood in Invincible. Yeah, I think it's safe to say the roles of demons suit him pretty well.
You cannot stop Ragnarok.
That's what heroes do.
You'd think that one eccentric loner would have made himself a costume.
You've probably seen me cover this franchise quite a bit in my previous videos. That's because I found a new kind of love for it, and that's nothing to do with Hit Girl, aka Chloe Grace Moretz. Kick-Ass is a unique kind of film with its own quips and USPs, out of which setting up the film is clearly one of them. I mean, you've got all these people surrounding you for a big moment in your life, and then you dive off a freaking building just to fall flat into a car placed perfectly within the firing line. It's a great contrast of context, and it does exactly what the creators wanted the scene to showcase. Man, I love how the general crowd all just started celebrating before he even demonstrated his ability to fly. Like, they started clapping when all he was doing was falling. That's pretty hilarious if you ask me. But yeah, the presentation of this opening clearly informs us that we're not going to be watching a basic family series. It's the sudden shock that makes it so unique. That's exactly why this scene is in at number 13. You know, it's hard to believe that The Incredibles is known for being a kids' film when it's got all the makings of a complete blockbuster. I mean, just look at how it opens with the car chase scene. Mr. Incredible looks so cool the way he transforms into his suit in his automated car. Who knows, maybe Elon Musk got the idea for his Tesla cars through this sequence. The way he nabs the criminal right after rescuing the cat was an added touch of class too. What I really want to talk about is his encounter with Elastigirl right here. This is what I mean by The Incredibles not being a kids' film, you know? Bro literally complimented her for her flexibility and thought we wouldn't notice. Well, I didn't notice it when I was a kid, but I do now. Yeah, maybe that's why so many guys out there are having a thing for her. Also, I want to give a shout out to that goon they were apprehending there. He didn't do anything, but just seeing him in the background made the whole thing funnier. The unsung heroes of our society are pizza delivery boys. Do they even know how much stress they have to go through just so they can deliver your pizza within 30 minutes or less? Well, Spider-Man does, which is why he decided to show it to us himself. The opening to the OG Spidey sequel couldn't have been more unique. The fact that he had to go to change into his Spider-Man outfit and use all his powers just to go on to show how tough the job actually is. Jokes aside, it was a neatly shot sequence with Peter Parker also completing side quests like saving kids from getting struck by a truck on the road. I also enjoyed how the side characters had memorable lines too, like that dude who thought Spider-Man stole Peter's pizzas. But damn, our boy does take his job seriously, doesn't he? Bro was rushing for dear life like his rent was due. Rent! Which it probably was, but still couldn't bring the pizzas on time. It just goes on to show that with great power comes no delivery guarantee.
It appears that your baby has sustained some fractures while inside your uterus.
Comic book superheroes usually remind us of Marvel and DC characters, but M. Night Shyamalan had a different vision in mind when he made 2000's Unbreakable. Sure, it was the same year when the OG X-Men film was released, but what made Unbreakable stand out was the presentation and tone of the story. Just look at how the movie begins. We first see Elijah Price, aka Mr. Glass, being born and immediately learn that there's something wrong with his body. That's an ominous start to what would go on to become a villain origin story, but the real kick comes in when we see the seemingly average David Dunn just chilling on a train and then boom, massive accident. Sure, they don't show the whole thing in detail, but the implication is more than enough to make us all go WTF. This film is a great example of how the superhero genre can be utilized, and I also want to shout out Shyamalan for giving us those comic book stats right at the beginning of the movie. That kind of prompted me to push this entry into my top 10. I made a promise not to make any Robert Pattinson eyeliner jokes, and I failed every single time I cover an entry from 2022's Batman. Let's see if I can do it this time then, eh? So the opening to this film was such a breath of fresh air because it felt as if I was watching a horror movie or a thriller. The flow of the scene was so dark and nerving, especially after we see Bruce Wayne with his hardened suit and questionable eyes. Damn it, I made another eyeliner joke.
You serious?
Anyway, the opening is over 10 minutes long, but the payoff is massive with the subway scene, which we all know is pretty badass. It's got the whole monologue and dramatic reveal, but at the same time it feels so controlled that I genuinely thought I was watching a David Fincher film. It does make sense because you can see the heavy influence of films like Seven and Zodiac here. Also, the criminals being afraid of Batman hiding in the shadows is literally the same fear that children have when they think that there's a monster in their closet. Incredibly done, isn't it?
Strings to bind your hands, not if my love can bind your
I remember watching this one in the cinema halls and people were reeling with laughter within the first 2 minutes of the opening scene. See, this is what happens when you do justice to the character and his comic book origins. I may have stopped hating on whatever the heck they tried to do with Ryan Reynolds in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but that doesn't mean I've forgiven them for it, you know? Luckily, the moment I saw Wade Wilson doing his thing in 2016 Deadpool, I was relieved to see that the creators have corrected the wrongs of 2009. The best part is that the scene isn't just funny, but also filled with a rather impressive action sequence. A lot of this stuff had to be pulled off with practical effects, which means it's a step up from any of the high-budget CGI battles that we're used to seeing nowadays. There's a reason people talk about 90s kids, and that's because we're just built different. We got to experience the world when the internet wasn't much of a thing and are still living through the advancements of modern technology. Also, 90s films just had a whole other appeal to them. Take Blade, for example. Not only did it become Marvel's first ever profitable movie, it also set the standard for the anti-hero trope that we all know and love today. I mean, if you open up with that discotheque scene, then you deserve a spot this high on my list. Watching Blade come in to rescue that dude from all those vampires was the most badass thing the world had seen back then. One of the smartest things about that scene is that this is the one and only time we get to see this guy. He doesn't become a supporting character or a sidekick, he doesn't get turned into a vampire and get offed by Blade later, he just vanishes, and that makes him all the more effective to the story. It's because he has no idea what the heck is going on, and that introduces the horror of this world in a way that no amount of exposition could do. He has no importance, he's just one more victim, one more face in the crowd, and clearly this happens all the time, and the only hope for people like him is Blade. This one just had to come in at some point in this video, and I think I've done justice by placing it a spot above Blade. After all, this is the most badass opening sequence involving the Avengers, and that too, the OG squad. There's so much to take in here. Bruce Banner seems to have some kind of control over the Hulk, so he's got his cute little affair with Black Widow going on the side, and we get to see Tony Stark don the Iron Man suit again right after that little bluff he gave us in Iron Man 3. Overall, the action here is top notch, and the fact that the scene manages to hold its own for as long as it does just goes on to show what great direction can do to an otherwise redundant trope. It was kind of hilarious to see Thor not having to do much and still smacking people around like they were toy soldiers, but hey, everyone should be given equal screen time, right? I was talking about how Unbreakable helped add more variety to the comic book genre, but 2009's Watchmen is a whole other ballgame. This is hands down my favourite opening scene in a superhero movie because not only does it show a rather brutal assault on the comedian, but it's also followed by the most epic opening credits scene in the genre. The premise of a mysterious assailant attacking an ex-superhero just hits different, especially with the dark setting and slow-mo shots. To be honest, I think the comedian did have it coming, but it's this kind of hyper-stylized cinematography that exhibits a higher standard of film direction. Zack Snyder might not be as coveted as Stanley Kubrick or Christopher Nolan, but my God, is that man talented.
Someone so unforgettable thinks that I
This is not my favourite Christopher Nolan film, but the first half of The Dark Knight Rises is a masterclass in filmmaking. The opening sequence itself sets us up for a cinematic rollercoaster, and Bane's hijacking of the plane is as good of an Uno reverse card as I've ever seen. I mean, bro beat Littlefinger at his own game. Nolan had said that he needed an actor who could talk with his eyes to play Bane, and Tom Hardy was the answer. He brought the mask to life, and he did a freaking amazing job at it too. My heart still aches over the loss of Heath Ledger, but I was also glad that Tom strolled in to give me another villain to love. Of course, until I found out that he was more of a simp than a Giga Chad. It's hard to find a scene in my top 3 that has the freaking Wolverine being beaten up like a normal human being, but that's the whole point, isn't it? The reason why Logan works is because of the harsh reality that the Wolverine has to live with now that his most powerful weapons have also become his most bothersome illness. I love how they did the title reveal too. It isn't flashy, it just appears on the right side with Logan on the ground bleeding. This is the X-Men's prime mutant at his lowest point in history. This set the entire tone for the rest of the movie, so it's a great decision to do a title reveal like this.
take them out.
I know what I said about the Age of Ultron sequence, but this scene gets the number 2 spot because it presents the exact opposite of what we're used to seeing in an Avengers film. Not only does the Mad Titan defeat the God of Thunder, Hulk, and most of Asgard's survivors, he also completely renders the events of Thor Ragnarok useless. Chris Hemsworth went through all that trouble of getting Surtur to fight Hela, but then Thanos drops by and takes him down anyway. Maybe Thor should have just waited for a bit and let his sister face off against the Mad Titan. Now that would have been an interesting show. But on a serious note, the tone of this scene felt eerie, intimidating and ominous all at the same time. It was a great piece of filmmaking in a genre that isn't really considered to be elite cinema. I mentioned Stanley Kubrick and Christopher Nolan together in my Watchmen entry, and that was basically to foreshadow their involvement in my top entry today. The opening of The Dark Knight is a cinematic masterpiece, and a lot of it has to do with the way Nolan took inspiration from Kubrick's 1965 crime noir The Killing. The masks were a direct reference, but even the plan in itself had hints of influence in them. It took me forever to figure out how genius this really was. The Joker eliminated the rest of the crew, meaning he wouldn't have to worry about getting snitched on. He took care of the main guy as well, meaning he would be useless to the mob. He definitely made the goons aware of his presence and blended in so perfectly that the cops would never even question him. I could go on, but you get the drift. Please give us more films like this. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV Region, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.